So you'd be surprised, but I actually don't care about the quality of Olivia Rodrigo's music. I'm sure it's fine. The reasons I don't like this person are a lot more nuanced than that, and in order to explain them, we need to travel back to the evening of August 14, 2003, when a crying, screaming, petulant me was brought into the world. A date that I am pissed off by to this day because it is possibly one of the worst dates to be born on. For starters, why did it have to be 2003? I think most people would agree that this century has been incredibly boring and uneventful. I mean, look at how much crazy shit happened in the previous one. We invented airplanes, then there was the Titanic, then 2 world wars, then nuclear reactors, nuclear bombs, then we broke the sound barrier, then we cured polio, then, let's see here. We landed on the moon? Hello? Then we created GPS and personal computers, and then finally, the very thing you're watching this video on, the internet. And then what have we done in the 21st century? We're already 23 years in, and we still haven't cured cancer, we haven't cured AIDS, we haven't colonized Mars. Oh, you thought the smartphone was a 21st century development? No, because the first smartphone was the IBM Simon released in 1994, so even that shit isn't new. All we've gotten is bad stuff like more wars and terrorist attacks and the unknown virus of unspecified origin from a few years ago. Obviously, there's going to be bad things happening throughout history, but like, usually you have good stuff to balance it out as well. Where's all the cool shit that somebody thinks of and says, yeah, this is the 21st century? Like, our grandparents got to witness color TV become a thing, and we're just sitting here, I don't know, buying the latest iPhone or something. Great fucking innovation, guys. Meanwhile, all these lucky pieces of shit born in 1999, like Madison Beer, get to say that they were born in the same century that digital cameras were invented. Actually, I should be mad at people born in the year 2000, like KB Lame or something, because that was technically the last year of the century, because we count years weird. Whatever. Fuck him and fuck you. I mean, I guess we got flat screen TVs and lab-grown meat in the 21st century, plus Neuralink and maybe actual AI in the next decade, but who knows where Neuralink will be in the next few years given how unpredictable Elon is nowadays, and AI is a whole double-edged sword of its own, so I don't even know what to think of that right now. And you guys gotta remember, the 20th century wasn't just the previous century, it was the previous millennium. Do you know how much major shit happened in the last 1,000 years? I mean, fuck. Somebody born in the 90s gets to say that they were born in the same millennium as Genghis Khan, Leonardo da Vinci, Isaac Newton, Napoleon, Albert Einstein, Elvis, but like, this millennium literally just started, so obviously there hasn't been enough time for lots of major stuff to happen. Like, if I had to be born in this millennium, I would have much rather been born in the 2300s or something, because that way there's 300 years behind me where cool stuff could have happened. I also happen to be one of the youngest in my family because I was born in 2003. Literally, the only people younger than me are my sister and 2 second cousins I've never even talked to. Like, my dad has a cousin several years younger than him, and she has a daughter who is 2 years older than me. Like, what the fuck? But of course, it's not just the year I'm pissed off about. First of all, August sounds like somebody misspelled the word autism. No offense to anyone with autism, obviously. It's just not a great feeling when your birthday month sounds like the name of a mental disorder, you know? Kind of like how chlamydia would be a great name for a girl, but it's not, because, you know, STD. And yes, I know the month is named after Augustus, but you know what? He should have thought of that before naming a month after himself, okay? On top of that, a lot of people seem to think that summer birthdays are awesome because beaches, pools, ice cream, yada yada yada. Trust me, it's not as great as it sounds. Now, of course, this mostly applies to children, but having a birthday party in the summer is a huge pain in the ass because pretty much all your friends are on vacation and won't be able to make it. And in my case, I was forced to spend most of my summers at my grandparents' house in another country because my parents didn't know where else to send me. Like, ever heard of a summer camp, mom? So not only could I not spend my birthdays with my friends, I couldn't even spend them with both my parents until I was like 16. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with celebrating with your grandparents, but like, it would have been nice if my parents and friends could also be there, you know? There's also the fact that it's kind of lame when you spend the whole school year at one age, but others get to move up to the next one during that time. And on that note, you know how if somebody has a birthday during the school year, when they actually go to school that day, they bring cupcakes, their classmates are congratulating, high-fiving them, maybe even giving them a present if it's a close friend or something, or even, well, this mostly happened to girls, but occasionally guys too. They would put decorations on the front of their lockers. Yeah, needless to say, summer birthday kids don't get to experience that shit. I mean, they would usually do a thing in June where summer kids sort of got to celebrate early and they could also bring cupcakes and stuff, but like, come on, that's not the same thing. We all know that. I actually remember in 2nd grade, I brought in cupcakes from Whole Foods, and back then they used this weird formula that made them taste like butter. Maybe they still do, I don't know. And a lot of kids weren't huge fans of that. One kid even straight up said he hated the cupcakes. And here's the thing. Back then, whenever I said anything remotely mean to anyone, they would immediately tell on me and I would get in trouble, and this time I decided to flip the script so that I'm the one telling on someone for saying something mean to me. But then when I did that, the teacher was just like, oh, well, that's not very nice of him. What, so I get in trouble for saying mean things, but when other kids do it, it's okay? Fucking bullshit. But whatever, I digress. And my struggles don't stop there, because you see, since August is towards the end of the year, there are a bunch of societal issues that come with being born late. Like, for example, I'm 20 right now, and a lot of kids from 2003 can already go to bars and party this summer, but of course I can't do that because I'll only be old enough when the summer's practically over. On the bright side, once I am old enough, I don't have to worry about that shit ever again, but it's certainly annoying right now. Or, for example, I wasn't able to do driver's ed in my sophomore year because I wasn't old enough yet. And sophomore year was the last time my school offered driver's ed, so I straight up missed out on that just because I wasn't born early enough. And keep that driving stuff in mind because we're gonna get back to it later. I also can't ask for a new iPhone for my birthday because they release a new one in September each year, so my phone will be outdated literally a month after getting it. And yes, I am aware that that is a huge first world problem, and I actually was able to ask for an iPhone SE for my birthday because they get released on a different schedule, but whatever, it still annoys me. On top of that, there's actually research that says people born later in the year are less likely to be successful, so yeah, if I ever fail in life, blame my birthday. And because I was born so late in the year, I also missed out on a shit ton of major events that happened in 2003. I wasn't here for the Columbia disaster, the invasion of Iraq, the establishment of Tesla or MySpace, the sequencing of the human genome, the renaming of Yugoslavia to Serbia and Montenegro, Michael Jordan's last game. I mean, hell, even Finding Nemo came out before I was born, and so did The Room, and Spy Kids 3, and Tomb Raider 6, and Too Fast, Too Furious, and the debut of Jimmy Kimmel. Also, being born in August means that I'm younger than pretty much every one of my peers. I'm the youngest in my friend group. I was younger than a shit ton of my classmates in school. I'm younger than one of my cousins by like 2 months, and I'm younger than pretty much every famous person born in 2003. I mean, for fuck's sake, I'm younger than Greta Thunberg. I'm younger than Maddie B. I'm younger than Bad Baby. God, that's a stupid fucking name. I'm younger than Jojo Siwa. I'm younger than Tate McRae, and I think I'm forgetting someone on this list. Oh yeah, that's right, Olivia Rodrigo. But hey, I'm older than Bella Ramsey, so you know, there's that, I guess. Oh look, Olivia Rodrigo bought beer and cigarettes. Yeah, it must be nice being 21, jackass. Now, why do I care this much about being younger than other people? I don't know, honestly. I guess it's just a remnant from when I was a little kid and would get upset when others turned a certain age before me. Like, for example, in 4th grade, when kids would turn 10 years old, I would be there like, why do they get to be 10 years old when I'm still 9? I guess I just associate a higher age with a higher level of superiority for some reason. But then again, America treats young people like shit. I actually made a video about this before, so maybe it's not so surprising. The only thing that makes me feel better is that a shit ton of famous people also have their birthday in August, and some of them are hot. But other than that, shit month. Horrendous. Absolutely terrible. And like, none of this is my parents' fault. I mean, they decided to have me right after getting married, but for fuck's sake, why couldn't something happen? I don't know, why couldn't the planets align in a certain way so that my parents could have met a couple months earlier, preferably even a couple years earlier, really anything, just so that I wouldn't have to be born in August. But that's not everything. Remember how I was talking about driver's ed? Well, I had potentially one of the most upsetting, annoying, and quite frankly infuriating experiences getting my driver's license. You see, in the state where I grew up in order to get a learner's permit, you had to be at least 16 and you had to pass a written test. And so a couple weeks after I turned 16, the school year had already started. One night I was sitting in my room doing practice questions for the permit test when all of a sudden my dad walks in and sees me doing that and is like, oh yeah? Well, what if studying for the permit test is going to cause you to forget about your schoolwork and fail your classes? For whatever reason, my dad doesn't believe in multitasking and thinks that you can't possibly worry about more than one thing over a long period of time, and that if you try, those things are guaranteed to interfere with each other and cause you to not accomplish anything. Which is obviously completely not true, because people are capable of focusing on multiple things throughout the day. Like me spending an hour after school taking driving lessons, let alone a couple minutes a day studying for a permit test, isn't going to cause me to suddenly forget about school and fail all my classes. Like, that's just ridiculous. But nonetheless, this resulted in my dad refusing to let me get a permit unless I started getting A's in all my classes. Like, you might have heard stories about people being allowed to get their permit but not their license, or being allowed to get their license but not be allowed to drive with it. No, in my case, it was no permit, no license, nothing, until I met this demand of his. First, he wanted me to get an A on an upcoming math quiz, and I ended up getting an A-, but that wasn't good enough for him. And then after that, he was like, you know what? No, actually, math is too easy. Why don't you get an A in computer science instead? And I talked about this in an older video, but basically, in high school, I was terrible at computer science. A lot of the problems we did in that class involved reading a bunch of code and explaining what it does, but I couldn't solve these questions for the life of me. And believe me, I busted my ass to get a better grade in this course, but I just simply couldn't do it. I studied for several hours every night, did a shit ton of practice problems, watched a bunch of tutorials, but my brain simply couldn't comprehend how to solve these types of problems. It just didn't click with me. It's like I was trying to read a bunch of Chinese. The only reason I didn't fail that class outright was because I did well on the homework, since my dad is good at computer science and was able to help me, and I did well on the simple conceptual questions they asked. A common misconception is that if you just work hard enough, put on some elbow grease and pick yourself up by the bootstraps, you are guaranteed to get straight A's and pass everything with flying colors. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. There are people out there who barely study for anything and still get straight A's, and then there are also people who study as hard as they can but still only get like a C+. And that's okay, because nobody's perfect and everybody has a different level of academic capability. Sometimes a C is simply the best you can do. Now, I can understand if somebody's not putting any effort into school whatsoever, like they're skipping classes, missing homework, playing video games all day instead of studying. Yeah, in that case, I can understand if parents put pressure on them to make them take school seriously. But if somebody is trying as hard as they can, even if they don't get perfect grades, as long as they're putting in effort, that's all that should matter to the parents. And even then, driving and grades are two completely separate things that have nothing to do with each other. Even if somebody's doing badly in school, not letting them get a license is kind of like if somebody, I don't know, refused to wash the dishes because their Wi-Fi wasn't working. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And frankly, parents should value their kid based on integrity and not what grades show up on their report card. Like, when I was in school, I didn't drink, I didn't do drugs, I didn't do nicotine, I didn't skip classes, I didn't get detention. I was a good kid, okay? Most parents would kill to have a kid like that, but not mine apparently, because all they cared about is the fact that I didn't have straight A's and therefore I'm worse than Hitler or something. The worst part is that whenever I complained about this online, people would always call me entitled, just because driving is a privilege and not a right, and so my parents don't have to let me do it if they don't want to. Which, I mean, yeah, I guess that's true from a legal perspective, but there are certain things in life where even if you're not legally required to do them, you still should. Like, you're not legally required to teach your kid how to swim or ride a bike, but it would be pretty stupid if you refuse to do those things, right? The same goes for driving. For those who don't know, America is a very, very, very car-centric country. In most places, public transport either sucks or is just straight up unavailable. On top of that, our cities are designed in a way where nothing is within walking distance from your house and you pretty much have to use a car to get to places. This isn't like the Netherlands or something where you could just ride a bike to get wherever you want. Why do you think America's driving tests are so much easier than in other countries? And why do you think you can get a license at 16 in America, or even 14 or 15 depending on the state, when in most places you have to be 18? Because driving is such a big necessity, they don't want to make it complicated. They just want you to have a license as early as possible so that you're actually able to get around. It's not you're 16, here's a license. It's you're 16, here's a license, so that you're not stuck in your house all day until you're 18. Unless you live in New York City or, I don't know, maybe Boston, you need to know how to drive. Which is why it baffles me that so many universities around the country don't let freshmen bring their cars on campus. Because, like, what do you mean we're not allowed to use the primary method of transportation in this country? Now, I did grow up in upstate New York, where the public transportation actually wasn't that terrible. Like, there was even a train in our town that could take you straight to New York City. But even then, the public transport was definitely lacking in a lot of regards, and you still needed to use a car to do a bunch of things like getting groceries or going to the movies. Now, to be clear, this isn't a good thing, because cars are expensive and people shouldn't be forced to buy one just to be able to get around. But that's how it is in this country and how it will be for the foreseeable future, and parents should honor the way things work. This isn't the first time my dad has tried to make me earn something, and I can understand earning things that are optional, like if I wanted a new phone or something, because, some parents don't want to spoil their kids, they want to teach them the value of hard work. I get it. But you can't do that here, because this is not optional. This is essential. It's not just some random luxury like a new iPhone or Xbox. And I told these people on the internet that, most parents let their kids start driving at this age, and they were like, well, those kids are just being spoiled. But, like, they're not, because their parents are simply providing them with a basic necessity. Now, if the parents can't afford driving lessons or insurance or whatever, that's a different story. But if they can afford those things, then they should let their kid get a license. There's also a societal aspect to it, because as you get closer to becoming an adult, your parents are supposed to gradually give you more freedom and independence, and driving is just one of those things parents do for their kids when they turn 16. It's like a milestone, or a rite of passage, if you will. This was a big deal, but my parents actively prevented me from getting this thing. Even my mom acted like it wasn't a big deal and I was just worrying about it for no reason. But, like, it's not for no reason. It's just that you guys are refusing to give me something that I need to have. Like, imagine if I was Jewish and my parents refused to let me have a bar mitzvah when I turned 13 because I didn't have straight A's. Like, you can't just do that. A kid's gotta have his bar mitzvah. Or bat mitzvah if it's a girl. If anything, my parents are the entitled ones, because they think that I'm obligated to provide them with straight A's and that I deserve to suffer if I don't do that. It's one thing to want your child to do well in school, and it's another to turn grades into a fucking religion where it's the only thing that matters and everything else is ignored. I told my dad multiple times to drop these ridiculous requirements because I am not able to do what he is demanding of me, but of course he kept insisting on this because he couldn't accept the fact that I wasn't the straight A prodigy genius he wanted me to be. He told me the reason he started demanding all this stuff was because around the time of my birthday, I was doing practice SATs and he didn't like how I did on my most recent one, but again, that doesn't fucking matter. It's not an excuse to not let me learn how to drive, because you need to know how to drive in this country. Eventually, he said that if I get an A on my math or computer science midterm, he will let me get the permit. And thankfully, I did end up getting an A on my math midterm, after which he finally signed off on the paperwork so I could get a permit and start learning how to drive. 6 months after I turned 16. But here's where another problem came in. At this point, it was already February 2020, and I think you guys know what was happening around the world around that time. Well, that thing caused all the driving schools in my area to close down, and while they did reopen a couple months later, my parents didn't want me to go there because they didn't want me to get infected, which is fair enough, but for fuck's sake, if you just let me have the permit right after I turned 16, like any other parent, I probably could have already done at least half my practice driving and finished the rest pretty quickly. And because I couldn't go to driving school, my only other option was to practice driving with my parents, and because they're very busy, I was only able to drive like 30 minutes a week at most, and considering you need 50 hours of practice driving before scheduling a road test if you're under 18 in New York, you can tell how long it would take to get the required amount. I spent over a year getting the required hours, and even as I was finishing my last year of high school, I still didn't have the amount that I needed. And so when I was graduating high school and basically all my classmates had their licenses and were driving around with their friends everywhere, I still had to walk and bike everywhere like a chump. Not because my parents couldn't get me my license in time, but because they didn't want to, because they thought that I wasn't worthy of it. They stole it from me, took it from me, killed it from me! To put it in perspective, even some kids in the grade below me already had their license. Like, that's how far behind I was. The best part is that right before graduating, my dad kept saying I should go to prom because prom is a big part of high school. Yeah, you know what else is a big part of high school, Dad? Getting your fucking driver's license. Holy shit. And by the way, Dad, if you're watching this, I'm not making this video to talk shit about you or say that I hate you or something. I'm simply saying your actions in this case were uncool and unacceptable, and that I'm still kind of pissed off about it, and that by making this video, hopefully I will get over it faster. But it doesn't stop there. About a month after graduating, I got the 50 hours and could finally take my driving test. At that point, I was just a couple weeks away from my 18th birthday. I also made a video about this in the past, but basically, I failed that test for reasons that I still think are kind of bullshit, and at this point, I was about to go to college in a few weeks. I figured that before trying to take the test again, I would actually take some lessons at a driving school near my university to get professional instruction. Because again, this whole time I was learning with my parents, and like, they are pretty good drivers, but I still think it would be best for me to learn from a professional to make sure I really get everything right, you know? But unfortunately, I wasn't able to do that either because the university I was going to had no nearby driving schools. Seriously, how unlucky is that? Because of this, I had to wait until winter break to take driving lessons back in my hometown. Then I took the driving test a second time during spring break of 2022. So, you know, 2 years after I could have gotten my license if my dad wasn't busy demanding perfect grades from me. Unfortunately, I failed that one too because I accidentally didn't give somebody the right of way. Then finally, on my third try, right after my second semester of college ended, I finally passed the test and got my license. At that point, I was just a few months away from being 19. Now, what does all of this have to do with Olivia Rodrigo? Well, guess what her most famous song is called? The song that actually made her take off in the first place. You can kind of see why having a song called Driver's License is going to piss me off and remind me of the fiasco that I had to deal with, because she's all like, oh my god, guys, I got a license when I was 17 so I could see my boyfriend. Meanwhile, when I was 17, I couldn't get a license because my dad was busy being butthurt about my grades. I mean, guys, I don't like Millie Bobby Brown for the same reason. Like, I used to not really care about her, like, okay, cool, it's the Stranger Things girl. But then I saw this video.
Does Millie Bobby Brown, okay, know how to drive? I do. I got my driver's license when I was 15 and a half. No, actually, sorry, I got my permit when I was 15 and a half. And then I got my driver's license when I was 16.
And now I actively dislike her. Like, bitch, if you didn't move to America, you wouldn't even be able to do that shit. But then again, if my parents didn't move to America, I wouldn't be alive right now. But that's a story for another day. Now, to be honest, I don't know why I take this shit so personally. Because at the end of the day, it is just a driver's license. You know, a piece of plastic that says you know how to operate a metal box on wheels. It's not like you're doomed to fail in life and will be publicly shunned and excluded from society just because you didn't get your license at 16. Hell, I heard some people nowadays are intentionally waiting until 18 to get their license so that they don't have to do driver's ed. Which, to be fair, isn't a great reason to delay it, but still, it shows that some people don't mind getting their license a little later. And for example, I got my first job when I was 17, which is also later than most people from what I can tell, but like, I don't really care that much. I'm not bothered by it, so maybe I shouldn't be bothered by this either. And the whole why was I born in this century/millennium thing is also kind of dumb. Like, who gives a shit what number year you were born in? It's literally just an arbitrary number we started counting at some point. We based it off a certain religious event that happened at a random point in time and collectively agreed to use it as a point of reference. But we could have used anything as a point of reference, and if we chose something different, the current year would also be different. Like in the Islamic calendar, the current year is 1445, so if we use that calendar as a reference, I was actually born in the same millennium as George Washington. But ultimately, who gives a shit? Somebody born in the 90s is going to relate a lot more to somebody born in the early 2000s than, I don't know, Christopher Columbus or something, who lived 600 years prior. Especially if they're born in the late 90s, because that's literally the same generation as early 2000s kids. It's kind of like how if something is $19.99 at a store, it seems like it's $19, $19, but it's actually basically 20. They just take off a cent because it makes the number look different. Like, imagine if William the Conqueror, who was also born at the start of a millennium, was like, wah, why couldn't I be born a couple years earlier so I could be born in the same millennium as, I don't know, Justinian of the Byzantines or something? It's just dumb. And hey, I was born before some major stuff in 2003 as well. I was around for the last flight of the Concorde, the creation of Steam and 4chan, and yeah, I know 4chan is a cesspool, but like, it's still a famous website and everything. The Cat in the Hat movie, even though it was weird as fuck, the last Lord of the Rings and Matrix trilogy movie, the first Call of Duty, Max Payne 2, and Invisible War. To be fair, Invisible War sucked, but so did Tomb Raider 6, so whatever. So yeah, there was some stuff I was around for in 2003. Dude, I swear, this whole video is so fucking stupid, but whatever, that wraps it up for this one. If you managed to make it through this incoherent rambling session of mine, congratulations. This was your captain speaking, and Olivia, you can Rodrigo fuck yourself.